I found the last photo by accident buried in the folder he left behind. It wasn't taken from the sidewalk like the others, not from the hallway, not from the bushes outside my window. No, this one was taken from inside my bedroom, from the foot of my bed, while I was sleeping, and in the corner of the frame was half of his face. He was smiling. That was the moment I realized he didn't just watch me. He wanted me to know he'd been there all along, breathing the same air, stepping on the same floorboards, waiting. The police called him a harmless case, just another patient in pain. But they never saw what I saw, what he carved into the walls of my basement, or the recordings he left on my answering machine. This isn't just a story about being watched. It's a story about being chosen. And once you're chosen, he never lets you go. If this already gave you chills, you're going to want to hear the rest. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and brace yourself, because this is only the beginning. Welcome to The Stranger Next to You. Part 1. The Man Who Watched Me Sleep. They always say trust your gut, but what if your gut is silent? What if the danger is sitting right in front of you, smiling gently, speaking softly, calling you doctor? My name is Dr. Lena Vale. I've been a trauma counselor for over 10 years. I've counseled veterans with PTSD, survivors of abuse, former addicts crawling their way back from oblivion. I've seen madness, I've helped guide people back from it. But nothing ever prepared me for Tobias Cray. When he first walked into my office, I thought he was just another referral, thin, well-groomed, the kind of polite that makes you double-check the chair he's sitting in. He had soft brown eyes, a voice barely louder than a whisper, and hands that trembled just enough to seem human. Harmless, really. That was my mistake. The file said he worked in it at a startup downtown. Anxiety, insomnia, social phobia. Pretty standard stuff. What it didn't say, what nobody could have known, was that Tobias had been attending open group therapy sessions at our wellness center for almost 3 years. Quiet, always in the back, never spoke, just watched. I should have caught it sooner. The way he never blinked when I spoke. The way he never reacted when other patients cried. The way he always left last and walked past my car, even when his wasn't parked near mine. But trauma makes you look for broken things, and Tobias played broken perfectly. His first private session started like any other. I welcomed him, asked him to tell me why he was here. And he just looked at me for a long moment and said, "Because you are." I smiled politely, a little confused, thinking it was anxiety talking. He said, "I've watched every video you've ever posted online. The ones before you took them down." My spine tingled. I hadn't uploaded anything in over 4 years. Just old YouTube content, clinical lectures, mindfulness practices, maybe a few AMA sessions for therapists in training. I had deleted most of them, or so I thought. "You said something once," he continued, "in that video about trauma loops. You said, the body returns to the place it was last noticed. And I thought, what if I could be the place you remember?" I froze. I was no longer in session. I was in a cage with something pretending to be human. From that day on, every week with Tobias felt like a balancing act. He never crossed professional boundaries on paper, but emotionally. He stepped over every line. Gently, quietly, like smoke under a doorframe. He'd say things like, "I saw you walking last Thursday. You looked tired." Or, "You changed your perfume. I liked the old one better." I reported it to our clinic supervisor. We discussed terminating the sessions. But Tobias was smart. If you read the transcripts, he never said anything that could get him committed. Just enough to make me feel unsafe and unsure. Until the night I came home and found the envelope. It was on my bed. My bedroom was locked. No signs of forced entry. Inside the envelope, a photo of me, asleep, shot from the foot of the bed, my face peaceful, unaware. and in the bottom right corner his hand, holding the camera. I don't remember screaming, but my throat was raw. I checked every window, every door. I called the police, filed a report. They found no prints, no evidence of forced entry. The officer looked at me with the kind of tired sympathy reserved for women who live alone and call in late-night panic. They told me to change my locks. I did. And then he left me a voicemail, not on my cell. On the old landline I hadn't used in years, one I never gave out. The message was short, 8 seconds, breathing, 3 words whispered. You looked peaceful. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of my living room with a knife in one hand and my phone in the other. Nothing happened. No footsteps. No knocks, just silence. Until 3:17 a.m. the power cut out. Not the whole block, just my apartment. I watched the hallway go black. Then from the crack under my front door I saw it light, a flicker, a shadow moving slowly across the gap. Pausing, leaning, I held my breath. Then a note slid under the door, folded, crisp. I waited. Counted to 50. Then crawled forward and picked it up. The note read, I've seen every room but this one. May I come in? I moved out the next day. I didn't tell anyone. I just packed what I could carry, stayed at a friend's guest house, and deleted every trace of my online life. I resigned from the clinic. I shut down my practice. I did everything they tell you not to do when you're a professional woman with a stalker. But I didn't care, because I knew Tobias wasn't obsessed with me. He believed we were meant to be together. And when a psychopath thinks you belong to them, no law, no rule, no restraining order will change that. Weeks passed. No signs, no messages, until I received a package, no return address. Just a small brown box taped neatly. Inside, a USB drive and a note. Your last session, I shouldn't have plugged it in, but I had to know. It was video, grainy, shaky from a handheld camera. My living room, my bedroom, my closet, all filmed from the inside, but the last clip was me, asleep. Again. Only this time the camera crept closer, closer, until it was inches from my face. Then the screen cut to black, and text appeared, I'm closer than you think. That was 2 years ago. I moved states, changed my name, built a new life. But I still keep a chair wedged under my doorknob at night. I still leave the closet light on. And every now and then when I wake up gasping, heart pounding, I swear I can smell his cologne just faintly in the room. Lavender, clean, harmless, just like him. But the thing that still haunts me most, not that he watched me, not that he broke into my home, not that he followed me for years. No, it's that in one of those old group therapy photos, the ones I thought were just archive shots, he's in the corner, staring at me, smiling, 3 years before we ever met. Subscribe if you're still breathing, because the next part only gets darker. This is the stranger next to you, and this was just part 1. Part 2. He locked the door behind him. It started with trust. Doesn't it always? You're told to trust those who know more than you, who wear the polished shoes, who shake your hand and ask you how your weekend was. My name is Jenna Lai, and I used to believe trust was earned. Until I met Christopher Malden. I was 29, hungry, overworked, trying to prove myself in a mid-tier law firm in downtown Austin. It wasn't glamorous. But I was on the partner track, ruthless hours, bottomless coffee, and the feeling that one wrong move would drop me off the radar forever. Malden was assigned to me on a Monday. Embezzlement case. White collar. No violence. No drama. That's what the file said. He was a venture capitalist, Ivy League, tech entrepreneur turned philanthropist. His LinkedIn glowed with charm. His press clippings painted him like a modern-day saint. Quiet, clean, cultured. The first time I met him, it was raining. He stepped into our conference room like he owned the oxygen. Navy suit, silver cufflinks, black leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my rent. He greeted me by name. "Jenna," he said warmly, "it's good to finally meet." I'd never spoken to him before. I assumed he'd read my name on the door or seen it in the emails. But then he added, "You always wear gray on Mondays. It's a nice color on you." My stomach twisted slightly. I laughed politely, shrugged it off. Because that's what we do, right? We excuse it. The first week passed uneventfully. We prepped documents. He answered every question calmly. Too calmly, no lawyer jokes. No casual defensiveness, just measured speech. Steady breath, almost rehearsed. Every meeting he placed his briefcase in the same spot. Never opened it. Never even touched it after sitting down. Just left it on the table like a dog marking territory. I joked about it once. "What's in there, a brick?" He smiled thinly and said, "Just the essentials." I should have stopped right then, but curiosity, that's the bait. One Friday night I stayed late. Everyone else had gone. The office was silent except for the faint hum of the exit signs and the sound of rain tapping glass like it was trying to be let in. That's when I noticed it. Malden's briefcase. Still in the conference room. Alone. My heart started racing. It didn't make sense. He never left that thing. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I locked the door, drew the blinds, and brought it into my office. I told myself I was verifying documentation, confirming legal integrity. What I was doing was trespassing. The lock wasn't even engaged. It opened with a click. Inside, no legal documents, no financial statements. Just 4 black folders, unmarked, and a 5th one, red. The black folders were labeled with names, women's names. Each one had a paper-clipped photo on the front, candid, blurry, like they were taken from behind bushes or car windows. Inside, handwritten notes, typed transcripts, routines, addresses, where they parked, what time they came home, which gym they used, who they dated. The last page in every folder had a red ink map, each woman's home with a date. All of them were from the past, and all of them were dead. I sat there for 10 minutes, frozen, not breathing, praying I was wrong. Then I opened the red folder and saw my face, not a posed headshot. A candid shot, me holding coffee outside my apartment, a Tuesday. I was smiling at something off-screen. I didn't remember the moment, but I looked happy. Beneath the photo in typed print, Phase 2, entry, and a date, that coming Monday. I dropped the folder. My chest collapsed in on itself. I was next. No doubt, no ambiguity. The air changed in that office. It felt like it wasn't mine anymore, like I wasn't alone. I closed the briefcase, placed it back exactly as I found it, wiped the desk, locked the room. I didn't go home that night. I went to my brother Rob's place. He's a patrol cop up in Bellingham. I didn't tell him everything, just said I was scared. He saw it in my eyes and didn't ask questions. The next morning I showed him the photo, his face drained of color. "We need to go to the FBI," he said, "not just the station. This is something else." I nodded. He took pictures. Backup copies, drove me back to the apartment to pack a go bag. But before we made it inside, my phone buzzed. Email. No subject, no address, just one line. "You opened it." I nearly vomited. That afternoon, Rob's FBI contact met us in a coffee shop 2 cities away. We handed over everything. The photos, the notes, the folder. The agent's face didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten around the file. He said, "I've seen obsessive profiles. I've seen kill kits, but this is curated, like a collector." That night, Malden didn't show up for his scheduled appointment. He didn't return to his apartment, didn't answer his phone, disappeared. No traces, no forwarding address, no digital signature. The firm buried it quietly, said he'd fled overseas, case dismissed. But I know what happened. He didn't flee, he moved to someone else. That's what keeps me up. Not that I was almost killed, but that he's still out there, looking for the next Jenna, looking for the next folder, the next Monday. Part 3. A basement full of echoes. My name is Lucas Ray. I'm a builder. Not the fancy type. No hard hats or skyscrapers. I do drywall, plumbing, and mud-stained repairs for suburban homes across Boulder, Colorado. Nothing spectacular. Just the kind of quiet work that leaves your hands calloused and your mind peaceful. At least it used to. I raised my daughter, Elena, alone since she was 8. Her mom left during the hard years. No letters, no calls. Elena and I figured life out, just the two of us. Game nights, drive-through pancakes, a shared Spotify playlist that still makes me cry when one of her songs plays without warning. We built a life, one that felt safe. Until the day she vanished. It was a rainy Thursday in March, the kind of cold that makes your knees hurt. I came home from work around 6:15. Power was flickering, nothing unusual for the neighborhood. I called out for her as I took off my boots. No response. Her phone wasn't in its charger. Her backpack was missing. She always texted me if she left the house. Always. I found one text that night. Just one. Time-stamped 5:44 p.m. from her number. It read, "Don't call. He's here. I'm sorry, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stopped existing for a second." Everything around me went silent. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a grave I hadn't noticed I was digging. I called every friend she had. No one had seen her. That's when I noticed the side door to the garage was open. Not just unlocked, open. And in the yard next to the fence I found one of her sneakers. Just one, the left one. Next to it a piece of torn hoodie, her favorite one. I couldn't breathe. Then I saw it. A plastic bag tucked under my truck's windshield wiper. Inside, a handwritten note in red ink. No cops. No calls. One wrong move, you never see her again. Go to the place where she first rode her bike. Alone. I knew exactly where that was. A cracked parking lot behind Maplewood Elementary. I taught her how to balance on 2 wheels there. I remember the way she laughed when she finally let go of my hand. I raced there. No hesitation. When I arrived, the rain was heavy, coming down in sheets. A single light flickered near the swings. I waited. 10 minutes. Then something slid across the pavement, slow and deliberate. Another plastic bag. Inside, her other sneaker. And a USB drive taped to an index card. Watch alone. I drove to a gas station and locked myself in the maintenance bathroom. I used my old laptop, the one with the cracked hinge, to open the file. What I saw still haunts me. A basement. Concrete floor. Rust-stained pipes. Elena was there, sitting in the corner, duct tape over her mouth, hands tied in front of her. Her eyes wide, terrified, still fighting. Behind her, a figure stood, partially out of frame. Just enough to make it clear she wasn't alone. Then the screen cut to black. No voice. No demand, just psychological control. But in the video something stood out. A poster, faded, vintage, a beer ad. I recognized it instantly. It used to hang in the back room of the auto shop where I worked part-time 3 years ago. That place had been shut down, condemned from black mold. Nobody had been in there for years, or so I thought. I raced there, smashed through the rusted gate. The lock was missing. Inside, the air was thick, wet, like something had been sweating for years behind the walls. I made my way to the back room, the one from the video, and there it was. Same poster, same stained wall. Only this time the room was empty, except for a chair in the middle, facing the wall, taped to the chair, a cheap burner phone. As I picked it up, it buzzed in my hand. A single message appeared. "You were too fast. She's gone." I dropped to my knees. Rage, grief, guilt. It all boiled together into something sharp. I searched every corner, screamed her name, checked the storage bays. Nothing. Then another message buzzed in, last chance. Go to where your brother died. That almost made me collapse. My brother Jake died in a crash when we were teens. Only I knew the exact location. A winding curve on Old Pine Road behind the hills near the reservoir. Nobody talked about it. Nobody else even knew it mattered. But someone did. Someone who had been watching me long enough to know every scar I carried. I drove like a man possessed. When I reached the curve, my headlights caught a glint of something metallic. A car. Elena's car. Parked under a broken streetlight. I didn't even stop the engine before running. Inside, she was there. Alive, duct tape gone, still shaking. Eyes swollen from crying. When she saw me, she burst into sobs and repeated the same thing over and over. He said you'd find me. He said it was a game. I held her for what felt like hours, and then we left. Police. Hospital interviews, but the man, he vanished. No fingerprints, no DNA, just a game that he won. Because no ransom was ever asked. No message, no motive, just a performance for us. I've since installed cameras, alarms, moved houses, changed jobs, but late at night when the house creaks and the pipes groan, I still feel him. Not near me, inside me. Inside the part of my mind that knows someone rehearsed this for years, my schedule, my emotions, my guilt, and used all of it to build a stage, just to watch me suffer. And now I wonder, who's the next father, who's the next daughter, and will they even know they're playing a role? Until the basement door closes, part 4, the one who never slept. Most people think silence is peaceful. But when you work night security at an abandoned complex in the dead center of Detroit, silence is never empty. It's full. Of breath that isn't yours. Of footsteps that stop when yours stop. Of things that wait for the dark to settle in your bones before they reach out and remind you this place doesn't belong to you. My name is Ben Core, 36, ex-military. Not much rattles me anymore. Or at least that's what I believed before I was stationed at the Danvers complex, a sprawling 6-building medical supply facility that hadn't operated since the 90s. The contract was simple. Patrol each building once per night, log movement, report damage. What they didn't tell me was that no guard had lasted longer than a week. Not one. I arrived in late November, just before the first snow. The sky was already iron gray by 5 p.m. and the whole place looked like it had been forgotten mid-collapse. Windows boarded, pipes exposed, graffiti everywhere. But for all its decay, something about it felt watched. On my first night, I did my rounds like clockwork. Building A to F 30-minute loop. Nothing unusual. Just the usual creaks of old metal and rodents in the walls. Until I got to Building D, the one with no working lights. My flashlight caught something just past the reception desk. A teacup, clean, not cracked, not dusty, just sitting there on the counter, steam still rising, and beside it a pair of men's boots. Muddy, large. Facing the chair like someone had just slipped them off to rest. I looked around. No sign of movement. But every hair on my body stood up like a wire had been tripped inside me. I backed out, slowly, logged it, reported it. They said no one was supposed to be in there, that it was probably squatters, but squatters don't steep Earl Grey and polish the porcelain before they leave. Over the next few nights, things escalated. Doors I'd locked were open. Lights I'd switched off flickered back on. And once, only once, I found the same teacup in a different room, still warm. Then came the Polaroids. Taped to the inside of my locker on the 5th night. Photos of me, walking between buildings, sitting in my truck, smoking near the chain-link fence. Someone had been following me, not just recently, for days. The grain on the photos suggested they were taken with an old instant camera. Silent, analog, hard to trace. I asked for backup. Denied. I demanded footage from the exterior cameras. all mysteriously blank from midnight to 5 a.m. Electrical issues, they said. City power grid is old, they said, but I wasn't stupid. Someone was inside the perimeter, watching, staying, and worst of all, never sleeping. I decided to trap him. I stayed late one night waiting, didn't move. Didn't make a sound, just sat in the security booth with all the monitors off. At 2:47 a.m. I heard the handle on the back door rattle. No knock, no voice, just a slow, steady turn. Then the door creaked open an inch. A breath followed, long, wet, like it had been held for hours. I drew my weapon, called out, no response. I stepped forward, boot by boot, and yanked the door open. Nothing, no one. Only a note pinned to the wall, you sleep. I don't. From then on, I stopped sleeping too. I stayed awake in my truck during the day, took caffeine pills, locked the security booth from inside and placed a chair against the door. But it didn't matter. He was always ahead, always one step deeper. The final night I tried one last patrol, just to prove I still had control. Building D again. My flashlight started flickering the moment I stepped in. Then it died. I stood in total blackness. And I heard it, not footsteps. Breathing, just behind me, close enough to feel the heat of it on my neck. Then something whispered, you dream of silence, I live inside it. I ran, didn't look back. But as I passed the third-floor hallway, I glanced at the wall and froze. There were dozens of Polaroids, pinned, framed, chronological, of me, sleeping in my truck, yawning on my smoke break, closing my eyes during a power nap. I didn't just see them, I saw me, caught at my most human, most vulnerable. And in every photo behind me a figure, blurry, tall, unmoving, always in the background. He was never outside, he was always inside. That was the last shift I ever worked. They said I abandoned my post, took my last paycheck and left the state. They're right, because I know what I saw, and I know what he is. He's not a man, he's something older, something that doesn't blink, doesn't eat, doesn't need sleep. And he's still there, in Building D, sitting at the desk with a cup of tea, waiting for the next guard, waiting for the next face to photograph. Because that's the real horror, isn't it? Not what's hiding in the dark, but what's been awake while you weren't. Part 5. He was in the break room first. The first note was almost a joke. I remember laughing, nervously, thinking maybe one of the techs was pulling a prank to break up the night shift monotony. It was written on a post-it, left sitting on top of the printer like a forgotten memo. Blue scrubs again, huh? That was it. Black ink, all caps. A bit of smugness in the curve of the letters, like the handwriting itself was grinning. My name's Emily Scott. I've been a registered nurse for 8 years. Most of them on the graveyard shift in a quiet regional hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina. Nothing high profile. Just routine overnight care for post-op patients, dementia cases, and the occasional ER admission too late to be transferred. Night shift does something to you. It rewires the way you hear silence, the way your mind handles shadows. You stop noticing time as hours, and start measuring it in heart monitor beeps and that hum fluorescent lights make when they're just about to go out. We've had our share of weirdness on the floor, people dying the moment the clocks hit 3:33 a.m., a hallway where the call button lights up even when the room is empty, that kind of folklore. But none of that prepared me for this. The note was the beginning, but it wasn't the first time he'd been there. My name is Emily Scott. I work night shift at a small hospital in Raleigh. The kind of place people forget exists until they need somewhere to dump an aging parent or hide from a bigger city's chaos. Nothing special, nothing famous. And that's exactly what made it perfect for him. The first few years were fine. Sure, the usual stress, understaffed, overworked, lonely, but I liked the quiet, the stillness between the beeps. I liked knowing my patients were asleep, and that the world felt paused between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., there was something sacred in that. I was wrong. The first real shift in the air came 3 weeks into covering the West Wing full-time. That's the older part of the hospital, the one we joke was built before electricity. Long, tiled corridors that echo even your quietest footsteps. Light bulbs that take forever to warm up. Old mechanical beds that creak even when no one's in them. It was 3:17 a.m. I just finished checking vitals for Mr. Rayner in 205, a sweet old man recovering from hip surgery. I remember humming as I walked down the corridor, something soft, familiar, maybe Billie Holiday or Fleetwood Mac, I can't remember, just something to fill the space. When I got back to the nurse's station, there was a note on the keyboard. Folded, clean, white printer paper, not a post-it this time. Inside, typed in blocky courier font, "You hum that song again and I'll join in." My whole body locked up. At first I told myself someone on staff was messing around. Hospitals get weird overnight. We get tired. We play jokes. It keeps us from going numb. But when I looked around, I realized there wasn't anyone else assigned to my wing that night. Not one. I called down to security, asked if any of the cameras caught someone coming through the fire door into my area. He said no. Didn't even pause, like he'd been expecting the question. That should have been my first warning. The next night I wore different scrubs, purple this time, and I didn't hum, but I still found another note. This time it was in my locker. "You change colors well." I liked blue. I slammed the locker shut so hard that it echoed through the empty hallway. I reported it to the floor manager, Margot. She told me to log it, said she'd file a report, and that she'd talk to the boys in security. But I could see it in her eyes. She didn't believe me. Or worse, she did. And she knew there was nothing she could do about it. By week 2, I stopped sleeping during the day. My nerves were shot. I kept replaying the little things. The sound of movement in the break room when I knew no one else was on the floor. The one light that flickered whenever I passed room 209. Only when I passed. The faint smell of cologne, cheap and too sweet, hanging in the air at 3 a.m. like it had just been worn. Then one night the power flickered, only for a moment, maybe 30 seconds, but the backup lights didn't kick in right away. I was left in full darkness, complete silence, until I heard it. 3 soft knocks, not on the door, on the wall, from inside the break room. That's when I stopped telling people what I was experiencing. That's when I realized this wasn't random. Whoever was doing this knew me, knew my routine, knew when I was alone, knew that the West Wing never had functioning cameras. The final straw came one night when I was on edge, unable to sit still, pacing between my charts and the break room door like I could outrun my own paranoia. Then I noticed something new. A chair moved just slightly, away from the table, not enough to raise alarm but enough to make me stop cold. Because I had tucked that chair in myself an hour before. I checked the fridge. Nothing moved. Vending machine untouched. But on the table was a cup of coffee, still warm. I hadn't made it. I don't drink hospital coffee, but someone had. And beside the cup was a single blue thread, from my old scrubs. I froze staring at that blue thread. It wasn't just similar. It was identical to the fabric of the blue scrubs I had worn 2 nights before. The ones I'd thrown in the staff laundry bin after a double shift. I hadn't seen them since. I picked it up with trembling fingers, half expecting it to vanish or crawl away like some hallucination. But it was real. Someone had touched my clothes. Someone had taken something from me. Someone had worn them. The coffee's warmth was fading fast, but there was still steam. He had just been here, maybe seconds before I entered. I checked the hallway behind me. Dead silence. Nothing but the humming lights and the distant sound of a heart monitor down in post-op. The West Wing, as always, was empty, except me. And him, I called security again. This time I didn't ask politely. I need the tapes pulled. Now, someone is coming into the wing. Someone is wearing my clothes. The guard on duty, Randy, paused for too long. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. We don't have tapes for the break room. And you know the West Wing cameras are down for budget repairs. I already knew that. But I didn't expect him to say it with such practiced calm, like it was a script. Do you even do rounds? I snapped. Do you ever walk this hall? I don't go past the pharmacy at night, he said, quiet now. Not anymore. Click. He hung up. And that was the first moment I realized I was completely alone, not just on the wing. In this entire fight, no one was coming to help me. That night, I tried something I hadn't done in weeks. I parked my car right under the exterior camera by the ER entrance. I checked every door twice. I left my phone on airplane mode. And when I reached the break room, I turned the lights off and waited in the dark. I sat perfectly still in the corner, legs pulled tight, no breath, no sound. For over 2 hours nothing happened. Then at 4:42 a.m. I heard it, soft footsteps, slow, dragging, not fast, not urgent, just confident. Whoever it was knew exactly where to step to avoid the creaky spots. He paused outside the break room door. I could hear his breathing. Then the doorknob shifted, not rattled, just tested, like he was checking to see if it was locked. It was. I couldn't move. The door opened an inch, then stopped. No one entered. I wanted to scream, to run, to leap over the table and attack whoever it was, but I couldn't move. He was waiting, so I waited too. And then just when I thought my heart would rip open from the pressure, he spoke. A whisper, like wind dragging across sand. Wrong room, then silence. Not retreating footsteps, not the door closing, just gone. I broke protocol and stayed locked in that break room until sunrise. I missed charting vitals. I left patients unchecked. I didn't care. When Margot found me the next morning, I was curled under the table with the chair barricading the door. She didn't ask questions. She just looked at me and said, "It happened again, didn't it?" That's when I realized something even worse. She knew. They all did. They just didn't talk about it. Later that afternoon, still unable to sleep, I dragged myself back to the hospital on my day off and demanded to see old incident reports. I said I was doing continuity of care research for safety evaluations. It was a lie, but they bought it, and I found it, buried in a report from 3 years ago, another night nurse. Her name was Karen Mendez. She de-reported strange notes, objects being moved, the feeling of being followed. She even claimed to have seen a man standing in the dark hallway near the vending machines at 3:14 a.m. watching her. But when she turned on the lights, he was gone. A week later, she requested a transfer. A month after that, she vanished. The report said she quit without notice. But in the margins, I saw a handwritten note that someone had tried to erase. It read, "Check the walls behind the break room." That was all. I went there that night. And I checked. And what I found was worse than anything I'd imagined. The break room wasn't anything special. Beige tile, microwave that smelled like old soup, a flickering lead above the coffee machine. But I stared at it that night like it was sacred, like it was the last known location before someone dropped off the map. I waited until the floor was silent, past 3 a.m., when the machines hummed their lonely lullabies and even the walls seemed to sleep. I didn't bring anyone with me. There was no one left to trust. I started on the far wall behind the fridge, moved everything carefully, listened for echoes, knocked gently, waiting for hollowness, and then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, not a hollow thud, not a creak, but something loose. I pressed my ear to the wall and knocked. The vibration felt wrong, dull, off-center. I crouched, ran my fingers along the baseboard, and found a small, square panel, painted over, cracked around the edges like it had been pried open before. I dug my nails into it and pulled. The piece gave way with a pop. And behind it, a crawl space, tight, barely 3 feet deep, maybe 5 feet long. I pointed my flashlight inside. The beam caught dust and something that looked like thread, then something else. Paper. I reached in, heart hammering, and pulled out photographs. Dozens, all Polaroids, not of me, not yet. These were of her. Karen Mendez, the nurse from the report. Photos of her working, eating, sitting at the nurse's station, sleeping in the break room. There was one of her brushing her hair, face half reflected in the hallway mirror. And in the background, a figure out of focus, tall, facing the camera, motionless. The next photo showed the same hallway empty. But written on the back in sharp, jagged ink, "She turned too fast." My hands were shaking. At the bottom of the stack was a folded paper towel. When I unfolded it, black ink bled across the fibers. "I thought you'd be smarter than her." I crawled back, shoved the panel closed, and sat against the fridge with my heart punching against my ribs like it wanted out. That was the night I knew something for certain. He wasn't just watching. He had been here, inside the room, inside the walls, long before me. He knew the hospital better than we did. He didn't break in, he'd never left. I stopped going into the break room after that. I brought my own thermos, ate at the station. I made sure I never stood near any vents, never leaned too close to a wall. I started counting my steps, timing my bathroom breaks, keeping all lights on, even in rooms that didn't need them. But it didn't matter. Because 3 nights later I found a new note. This one wasn't left on paper. It was scratched into the glass of the medicine cabinet in the supply room. 7 words: "You don't need a break to break." That was when I began to crack. I made a mistake that night. I called my sister, told her everything. She told me I needed to quit, said none of this was worth my sanity, my safety. She was right, but I couldn't stop, because it wasn't about fear anymore. It was about proof. It was about Karen. It was about the whisper I still sometimes heard in the air vents, too soft to record, too clear to deny. He was still there. One final event broke me. I came in early. 6:45 p.m. The sun hadn't even set. I went to check my locker, and inside, taped to the back wall, perfectly centered, was a new Polaroid of me last night, sleeping. Not in the break room, not at the station, but at home, in my bed. From the side where the window sits, cracked just slightly for airflow. There was no note this time, just the photo, and one blue thread taped beside it. I couldn't go home after that. I couldn't even bring myself to walk out to the parking lot, because the photo didn't just show me sleeping. It showed the room exactly as I had left it. Books still stacked on the nightstand. My sweater draped over the corner of the bed frame. Phone charger tangled near the floor. Details only I knew. Details no one should have access to, not unless they were inside, not unless they'd stood there long enough to take it all in. I checked every camera feed in the hospital that night. I didn't care about protocol anymore. I needed answers, but the cameras on the West Wing were still out, have been for months. The others, clean, too clean, no sign of anyone. No movement after midnight, but I knew better. He wasn't caught on camera because he didn't need to be. He wasn't breaking in. He belonged here. And now, apparently, he belonged everywhere I went. That morning, I didn't go home. I sat in the staff lounge until the sun came up and called a locksmith. Told them I lost my keys. I didn't care if they believed me. I just needed every lock changed. I booked a hotel for a week, paid cash. I was done. Done pretending this was paranoia. Done believing this was a game. This wasn't about scare tactics anymore. This was preparation for something worse. On the second day at the hotel, I opened my bag and found something I hadn't packed. A pair of my old blue scrubs, neatly folded, smelling faintly of that same too-sweet cologne. I dropped them. I didn't even scream. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the carpet, wondering what the hell I'd done to deserve this. Then I noticed the light on the hotel phone blinking. Voicemail. No one knew I was here. I hadn't told a soul. I picked up the receiver, hands ice cold, and hit play. Static. Then a voice, my voice, whispering. You always walk to the break room on your left side. You favor your right leg when you're tired. You forget to lock your car 3 times a week. You sleep with one pillow. You cry in the shower every Thursday. You think no one notices. But I do, then silence, then. Click end of message. I nearly threw the phone across the room. Instead, I unplugged it, turned off the lights, sat in the corner like a child waiting for a storm to pass. It didn't, because the storm wasn't outside. It was inside me now. I didn't go back to the hospital that week, didn't call in, didn't return texts. Margot left a voicemail on the 3rd day. Emily, I get it now. I found something too, in the locker room. A mirror I'd never noticed before, scratched with your name. You need to leave. Don't come back. She hung up before I could respond. I never saw her again. I heard she transferred to another facility. No forwarding contact, just gone. Like Karen, like me. I tried calling the police again, gave them everything, every note, every photo. They said they'd file a report, said they'd increase patrol around my neighborhood. But when I asked if they'd seen anything suspicious in the camera logs outside my apartment, the officer paused, then said, "You live on Maplewood, right? Unit 304. My stomach dropped. Yeah, there is no camera facing your building. There used to be, I said. I've seen it. Another pause. There hasn't been one for at least 6 months. The pole's still there, but the unit's missing. I didn't ask why. I already knew the answer. He took it. I started wondering if any of this had ever been real. If the hospital, the hallway, the notes, if it was all just one long psychotic break. But deep down, I knew better. Because fear that personal doesn't come from nowhere. Someone had learned me, studied me, inhabited my routines like skin. And the thing about routines, once you wear them long enough, they stop belonging to you. They become his. That was when I got the envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just sitting on the hood of my car at the hotel. Inside, another photo, but not of me. It was of a new nurse, a girl I'd never seen, wearing purple scrubs, smiling at the nurse's station. And behind her, blurry, the same break room hallway, the same flickering light, and in the far left of the frame, a shadow, tall, still, watching her like he had watched me, like he had watched Karen, like he had always done. I stared at the photo for a long time. The new nurse. I didn't know her name, but I recognized the look on her face. That bright, first-shift glow. That fragile sense of I'm safe that only exists before you realize the walls have eyes. And in the corner of the photo, like always, he stood. Not quite visible, but undeniably there. I flipped the picture over. 3 words in that same sharp black ink, "You're next again." Not her, me, not finished. Restarted. It was never about Karen, or Margot, or the new girl. He'd circled back to me because I had walked away before he was done. I should have burned the photo, cut the ties, moved states, but I didn't. I drove back to the hospital. Back to the break room. I walked in like I still worked there. Wore my badge like armor. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Same microwave, same flickering light. Same chair, only now it wasn't pushed in. It was waiting. Like someone had just stood up. On the table, a thermos. Blue, mine, I hadn't brought it. Next to it, a folded note. I sat down before I read it. I don't know why. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was surrendering. I opened the note. Typed block letters, same as always, but this time it said more. You left early. You interrupted the ending. You thought the story was yours. It was. You were never the main character. You were just the favorite scene. And below that, he had signed it. No name, just an icon. A tiny circle with a single vertical slit in the middle like an eye, open, forever. I stood and backed away. But as I turned, I saw something new. The wall behind the fridge was different now. The panel I had pried open weeks ago had been sealed, repainted, and in its place a mirror. One I'd never seen before, long, thin, seamless, framed in that same soft gray as the hallway outside. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't old. It was new, deliberately placed. My reflection stared back at me, but something about it wasn't right. I raised my hand. My reflection didn't move, not at first. Then slowly it smiled. Not me, it smiled, and then it blinked, just once. I don't remember leaving the hospital. I don't remember getting in my car. But I do remember the voicemail on my phone the next morning. A whisper, just 4 words, "See you next shift." I no longer work nights. I don't wear scrubs. I live in a different city, different state. I keep all the lights on. I tape over mirrors. I sleep on the floor far from windows. But sometimes when I walk past reflective glass, storefronts, bus windows, black screens before they boot up, I swear I see him, standing in the background, just behind me, still wearing my scrubs, still waiting in the break room. Like he never left, because maybe he never did. Maybe he isn't a man, maybe he's a place, an idea, a presence that lives inside routine, inside repetition, inside the cracks between who you are and who's watching. And if you ever work nights, if you ever find a cup of warm coffee where no one's supposed to be, don't drink it, don't sit down, don't hum your favorite song, and whatever you do, never go into the break room first. Part 6. Neighbor with no curtains. Suburbs aren't supposed to be scary. That's the whole point of them, isn't it? Mowed lawns, dog walkers, neighborly waves, HOA newsletters that pretend to care. But let me tell you something I've learned too late. Evil doesn't just live in the woods. Sometimes it lives next door, and sometimes it brings you muffins. My name is Ava Carter. I'm 32. My husband Drew is 35. We moved to a quiet neighborhood just outside of Portland last year, fresh off the chaos of city life. We wanted calm, safety, that Pinterest-filtered version of adulthood where the streetlights always work and the worst thing you deal with is someone stealing your recycling bin. Our new house was perfect, clean, modern, just enough space, and our neighbors were overly friendly, especially Todd. The first time we met him, he was already halfway across our lawn before we finished unpacking the U-Haul. Cargo shorts, trimmed hair, tanned skin that looked machine-buffed. He smiled so wide I thought his face might crack. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he beamed. "I brought brownies. No nuts, just chocolate. Everyone loves chocolate." His name was on the Tupperware in block letters. Todd. I didn't think much of it at the time. Todd was just one of those people, overly helpful, always available, eerily tuned into your schedule. But that was the problem. He was too available. Every time we opened the door, he was there, watering his plants, washing his car, trimming a hedge that didn't exist. He remembered everything we said. "How's Drew's knee doing?" He'd ask 3 weeks after Drew had mentioned it once. "Did you end up getting that French press from Amazon?" It felt harmless at first, maybe even sweet, until it didn't. The first time things felt truly off was on a Saturday night. We came home late from a barbecue across town. It was almost midnight, and there, sitting neatly on our porch, was a gift bag. Inside, a photo frame. In the frame, a photo of us at the barbecue, laughing. Taken from behind through a crowd, not from a phone we owned, not from any friend we'd invited, just there, framed. And at the bottom, carved in tiny, neat letters, "Welcome home." We didn't say anything about the photo at first. Drew laughed awkwardly, like maybe one of our friends was playing a joke, but I couldn't laugh. I stared at that frame for a long time, fingers locked on the edges, the pit in my stomach spreading like ink in water. It wasn't just the photo, it was the detail, the precision. The way it was framed, polished wood, no fingerprints, perfectly centered. This wasn't casual, this was careful. The next morning, Todd waved from his driveway. Late night. He called out, "Saw your car pull in after 11:30. Must have been a fun one." My mouth went dry. We hadn't told anyone where we were going. I hadn't even posted about the barbecue. "Yeah," I said weakly. "Long drive back." "Well," he said, leaning on the fence between our yards, "next time you two have plans, you let me know. I'll make sure the porch light's on for you." He smiled, and I noticed something for the first time. Todd had no curtains. Not in any window. His house was open, bright. Every room lit every night, like a showroom or a stage. That night I watched from our upstairs window. His living room was empty, but the TV was on. A looping surveillance feed of the street. 6 cameras at least. One pointed directly at our front door. I told Drew. He shrugged. "So he's a little intense. You said it yourself, people out here have too much time." He wasn't worried. But I was, because the next morning we found another gift. This time a sealed envelope on our windshield. Inside, a typed note. "You two make such a nice pair." It was signed with a smiley face. No name, no return address. Just the idea that someone somewhere was paying attention. Too much attention. I went to the HOA president, Linda something. I told her Todd was making us uncomfortable. She sighed before I finished my sentence. "You're not the first person to say that," she said. "But he's technically never done anything illegal. He's just enthusiastic." "Enthusiastic?" I asked. "He's watching us." "He watches everyone," she replied. "But he also reports broken sprinklers before anyone else notices. Clears snow for the whole block before 5 a.m. And once stayed with an elderly neighbor for 6 hours while her daughter was stuck in traffic." People overlook things like overfriendliness. It makes them feel safe. Safe. That word echoed in my head like a warning, because by now we weren't safe. We were monitored. I started noticing the clicks, soft clicks in the walls, little static pops when we were talking about personal things. I turned off our smart speakers. Drew said I was being paranoid. "You've been reading too many Reddit stories," he laughed. "This is exactly how those 'my neighbor's a stalker' threads start. You spiral. I wish I'd spiraled sooner. I wish I'd trusted my gut before things turned from weird to wrong." One night I woke up at 3:11 a.m. to the sound of a faint creak downstairs. Drew was asleep. I grabbed my phone and crept to the top of the stairs. I didn't hear anything at first, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft buzz of the porch light. But then I noticed it. The smell, cheap cologne, sweet, familiar. The same scent Todd wore. I waited. Nothing moved. I turned on all the lights, checked every door, every window, all locked, all secure, except the basement. The door wasn't open, but it was unlocked. We never used the basement. It was unfinished, dusty, just storage. I opened it slowly and called out, "Hello?" My voice came back to me dry and shaking. No answer. I went down 3 steps, then 4, then froze. Because on the bottom stair in the dust was a footprint, fresh, clear, too large to be mine, too narrow to be Drew's. And next to it a single blue thread. I screamed. Woke Drew. He checked the basement with a bat but found nothing. "Footprints settle," he said. "Dust moves. Probably hours from earlier. You're just noticing now." I didn't argue. I just stopped sleeping. I sat up every night, watching the windows, checking the locks twice, 3 times. I started taking photos of our house, just in case something was moved, changed. but he was always ahead of me. The photos would return later, printed, edited, annotated in handwriting I didn't recognize. You left this light on. Your dog barks less when you wear gray. Drew doesn't wash his mug. I didn't show Drew those notes. I was afraid. Afraid he'd still think it was paranoia. Afraid I might start to agree. But I knew the truth. The way Todd looked at me changed. The way he hovered when Drew wasn't around. The way he said things like, "Must be hard being the only one keeping the house together, and some people just don't pay attention like you do." It wasn't small talk, it was testing, gauging. Then one day Drew didn't come home. He was supposed to pick up dinner. He texted me at 6:14 p.m. be there in 20. Then nothing. I called. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. At 7:03 I panicked and called the police. They found his car on the edge of a park 5 miles away. Unlocked, lights off. No sign of him, no struggle, no blood, nothing, just gone. That night I stood in our living room trying not to collapse when there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just 3 soft, polite taps. I opened it. Todd stood there holding a casserole dish. "I heard about Drew," he said gently. "You shouldn't be alone right now." He stepped forward like he belonged there. I slammed the door. And that night the lights in his house stayed on until morning. But he wasn't inside, I know. Because I saw him, in the reflection, standing behind me, inside my house. Smiling. Part 7, The Stranger Who Knew My Name. There are 2 kinds of fear. The first is sharp, immediate, like hearing a footstep behind you in an alley. It stabs and vanishes. The second kind is slower, heavier. It settles on you like mold in your walls. You stop noticing until it's already poisoned everything. This story is about the second kind. My name is Matthew Lane. I used to be a school counselor in Denver. Not a detective, not a soldier. I was a good listener. I believed in logic, in evidence, in mental health over superstition. I never believed in evil, not as a force anyway. Not until the day someone called me by my full name before I ever introduced myself. It was late October when I first saw him. I was coming home from work, just past 7 p.m., when I noticed a man across the street, pale, still, staring at my house. He wasn't dressed oddly. No ragged coat, no shadowy figure in the rain, just a man in clean, dark clothes, watching. I figured he was a neighbor. New, maybe. I gave a polite nod. He didn't move, didn't blink, just turned and walked slowly down the sidewalk. That night I heard something strange around 2:20 a.m., a soft tap tap tap, not on the front door but on the wall. Right behind my headboard. I live in a detached home. There's nothing on the other side of that wall but open air. I got up, turned every light on, nothing outside, no one in the yard. I figured maybe it was a bird, maybe just the wind. I started sleeping with headphones in after that. The noises didn't stop. They got worse. Tapping turned to scratching. Scratching turned to footsteps inside when I knew I was alone. One morning I woke up to find my closet door wide open. I never leave it open. Inside something had been arranged. My shoes were all moved. Not taken, just repositioned in a perfect circle. At the center, a Polaroid. Not one I had taken. It showed the outside of my house, taken from the woods behind my fence. On the back, "You should lock your window." I checked every entry point. Everything was locked. Nothing broken. No signs of forced entry. But I could feel it, like the air had changed. Like someone had breathed on everything I owned. I installed cameras. 3 inside, 2 outside. 1 in the bedroom. I didn't care how paranoid it made me look. I needed proof. I needed to feel sane. That night I slept like a corpse. Woke up feeling oddly calm. Then I checked the footage. Every single feed had been blacked out between 2:12 a.m. and 2:37 a.m. Not glitched. Not skipped. Just pitch black. No sound. No image. When the feed resumed, everything looked normal, except my bedroom. The camera had been moved an inch to the left, enough to center my sleeping body in the frame. I called the police. They sent an officer who looked 20 years old and already exhausted. He checked the locks, the windows, the footage. He wrote a report and left. Said maybe I had sleepwalked. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner with the lights on. Around 2:30 a.m. I saw it. Not a person, a shadow, moving across the hallway outside my room. Slowly, deliberately, no footsteps, no sound, just gliding. I stood frozen, clutching a bed I didn't know I'd picked up. I didn't go into the hall, I didn't chase it. I just waited until sunrise. When I finally stepped out, I found something at my front door. A gift box, black ribbon, no tag. Inside, a small bundle of teeth, human. Each one engraved with a single letter. Together they spelled my name. Not Matt, not Mr. Lane. Matthew. I threw up in the sink, called the police again. This time they sent a detective. She took one look at the teeth and asked if I'd ever pissed anyone off. I laughed. I don't have enemies. I barely have friends. She said it was probably an elaborate threat, but her voice cracked when she said it, like she didn't believe it either. I checked myself into a hotel that night. Didn't even pack, just left. But he followed. I know because the front desk called at 3 a.m. to say a man had left something for me. Said it was urgent, the clerk said. Didn't leave a name. I asked what it was. A mirror, she said, wrapped in bedsheets. I didn't go downstairs. I left before dawn. Drove 3 hours to my brother's place in Wyoming. He wasn't home, but I had a key. I planned to stay a few nights. Regroup, tell no one. But on the second night I found something in the guest bathroom. Written in condensation on the mirror, "That's not your name." I stared at it until the letters faded, but the meaning stayed. And suddenly everything clicked. He didn't just know my name, he didn't just want to watch me. He wanted to replace me, to erase me, to become me. I started seeing him in dreams, standing over me while I slept. Wearing my clothes, sitting at my desk, smiling into the camera with my face. One night I woke up choking. There was no one in the room, but something had been shoved into my mouth while I slept. A page, torn from a psychology textbook. The title read, "Identity Displacement and Post-Traumatic Self-Rejection." Underlined 3 times. I don't know how he did it. I don't know when he entered. But I do know this: he's not just a stalker, not a man, he's something else. Something that waits until you start questioning who you are. Then he moves in, piece by piece, thought by thought, until your own voice sounds foreign, until your reflection moves a second too late, until your friends stop recognizing your laugh, until the mail starts coming with his name on it. The last time I saw myself, I was walking out of a coffee shop. Except I hadn't gone inside. I was across the street, watching. The man looked like me, exactly like me. Same coat, same shoes, same walk, but he didn't look up, didn't acknowledge me, just kept walking, like I didn't exist, like I was the shadow now. I don't know who I am anymore. But I know he still watches, from mirrors, from windows, from photos I didn't take. And when I whisper my name to myself at night, it doesn't sound right. Not anymore. Part 8. The walls remember her breathing. I was 8 years old the first time I heard the walls whisper. We were living in an old colonial house in Savannah, Georgia. Wide plank floors, high ceilings, thin walls. You could hear everything: the creak of footsteps, the faucet dripping 3 rooms away, the click of the thermostat. But the whispers weren't from outside. They were inside the walls, close, hot, almost wet. At first they came only at night. A low murmur, like a voice struggling through insulation. Breathing, whimpering. Then a soft laugh, the kind you hear right before someone tells you they've done something awful. My parents never heard it, or pretended not to. My mother said houses settle. My father said you've got an imagination, kid. So I stopped telling them, but I never stopped hearing her. She was always there, just behind the drywall, just behind my bed. I never saw her. But I felt her. When I walked past certain corners, I'd feel heat like breath on the back of my neck. Once I left a glass of water on my nightstand. In the morning it was half empty. No condensation, no wet ring, just gone. Like someone had drunk it while I slept. Sometimes when I leaned against the wall, I could hear her breathing in sync with mine, like she was copying me, practicing. One night I woke up gasping. Not because I was scared, but because I was trying to breathe for two. It felt like she was using my lungs. We moved out of that house when I was 13. My parents divorced. I left the state. Thought that would be the end of it. It was. At every place I've ever lived since, she returns. Always in the walls, always waiting until I'm alone, always just beyond the drywall. And each time she learns a little more. My routines, my voice, my fears. The sounds got clearer over the years. By the time I was 26, she started speaking full words. At first, she repeated things I said, echoed my phone calls. Then she started saying things I'd only thought but never spoken. Don't tell them, he's lying. You're going to die in here. I started recording everything, bought high-end mics, hid them behind vents. One night I caught her. A voice, faint but there, whispering over and over, I'm not behind the wall. I am the wall. I played it for a friend. He laughed, said it was feedback, said I needed to touch grass. That friend disappeared 2 weeks later. Gone. No sign, no goodbye, just missing. And when I got back to my apartment that night, she spoke clearly for the first time. He heard me. I fixed it. That's when I stopped bringing people over. I became reclusive, obsessed. I started mapping every sound in my apartment, timing the whispers, tracking the cold spots. I learned her habits. She liked mirrors, she liked corners. She hated music. Anytime I played loud music, the whispers stopped. Not in pain, in anger. Things would fall, lights would flicker. One night, my speakers burst into flames. I stopped listening to music after that. But the most horrifying moment came 6 months ago. I was sleeping, I thought. Then I felt it, a weight on my chest. Not the old myth, not sleep paralysis. I could move. I just didn't want to because I knew. She was on top of me, breathing in sync. And then, without warning, she exhaled into my mouth. It wasn't air, it was something colder, thicker, like dust, like memory. It poured down my throat and filled me until I was choking. I threw myself from the bed, gasping, heaving. Nothing came out, but my lungs burned for days. The next morning I found my face in the mirror wasn't quite right. My eyes were my eyes, but wrong, tilted, unblinking, like she had moved in. Since then I've seen her in every reflection. Not a ghost, not a girl, not human, but familiar. Her mouth moves just before mine. She smiles when I frown. She mouths words I haven't said yet. When I cover the mirror, I hear scratching. When I take it down, there's nothing on the wall, just breath marks. As if someone was waiting, mouth pressed against the glass. I tried to leave. Moved 3 times. Changed names. Burned the old house to the ground. But it doesn't matter. Because she doesn't live in buildings. She lives in walls, any wall, every wall. She is space itself. The space between people, between thoughts, between lives. The last time I tried to flee, I found a note in my suitcase. Handwritten, ink smudged. One sentence, you don't leave me, you bring me. Now the walls aren't whispering anymore. They're screaming, but only when I try to sleep. They don't say my name, they breathe it, like it's sacred. Like it's something they're trying to swallow. I hear her pacing behind the plaster, nails dragging across beams. Sometimes I wake up to drywall powder on my tongue. Sometimes I hear her say shhh when I try to speak. And lately, I've started to answer. Tonight she asked, can I wear you? And I said yes. I don't remember doing it, but I heard myself say it. And now the lights flicker whenever I smile. Now my shadow moves when I don't. Now I dream of floors creaking and walls cracking and things pushing from the inside out. She is closer now. Not behind the wall, not in the wall. She is the wall, and I am part of her now. Part 9. I ate what he gave me. I didn't know what was in the food at first. I just knew it tasted off. Not spoiled. Not bitter, just wrong, like something pretending to be flavor. Like imitation chicken that's been thawed and reheated 1,000 times too many. It started after I moved into the apartment on Grant Street. Cheap rent. Quiet building. Friendly landlord. No questions asked. It felt like a fresh start. I'd been trying to escape the things from before, the whispers in the walls, the things in the mirrors, the static in my sleep. I thought I was safe. Then came the smell. Every evening around 6:00, like clockwork, something would drift through the vents. Thick, meaty, unplaceable. It didn't smell bad, but it didn't smell right either. It made my mouth water even when I wasn't hungry. The first time I saw the tray, it was already inside my apartment, sitting on the counter, a small silver dish. No note, just a lid and a folded napkin beside it. I called the landlord, furious. He denied ever being in my unit. Said only I had the keys. I threatened to report it. He hung up. But the next night, same time, same smell, the tray was back. This time I opened it. Inside, a small portion of something grayish, soft, almost gelatinous, but steaming. Fresh. Against my better judgment, I touched it, still warm, slightly sticky. I lifted it to my mouth. My body said no, my brain said no, but my hands said yes. I tasted it. It was the best thing I've ever eaten. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean my entire nervous system lit up. My vision sharpened. My jaw unclenched. For a moment I was completely pain-free. No fear, no memories, just warmth, peace. So I ate all of it. The moment it was gone, the taste vanished. No aftertaste, no nausea, just absence. The next morning I woke up with blood in my mouth. Not from my teeth, not from my gums. It was leaking from my throat. I went to urgent care. The doctor said everything looked fine. Probably a ruptured capillary, he said. Do you eat spicy food? I didn't say anything. How could I explain it? I stopped opening the tray after that, but it didn't stop arriving. Every night. Same tray, same amount. Sometimes the color changed. Sometimes it shimmered. Sometimes it moved. I threw it away. I flushed it. I dumped it in the alley. But every time I turned around, there it was again. On the counter, waiting. I started hearing things after the 3rd week. A voice, coming from inside my mouth. Not a hallucination, not schizophrenia. This voice came after I spoke. As if echoing, correcting. I'd say I'm okay. It would whisper, you're hollow. I'd say I don't want it. It would whisper, you already ate. One night I screamed into the empty room. What do you want from me? And the voice whispered softly from my stomach, more. I stopped eating altogether. Real food made me gag. Bread crumbled to ash. Water tasted like rust. Fruit burned my tongue, but the tray always went down smooth, like it belonged. I started losing weight. Then I started gaining it, in strange places. My arms felt too long. My jaw clicked when I opened it wide. My stomach swelled and pulsed at night, not like digestion but like movement. I swore I could hear something shifting inside, scratching. I went to the hospital. They ran scans, blood work, imaging. Everything came back normal, except the nurse looked at me strange when she took my pulse. Your heartbeat, she said. It's not where it should be. She didn't explain. She never came back into the room. The next night the tray was already on my bedside table when I got home, and there was a note, typed, simple, no signature, inside something black, wet, pulsing faintly. I don't know what it was. It was still warm, still moving. I didn't want to eat it, but my hands moved on their own. I picked it up, and before I knew it, I was chewing. It burst in my mouth, slick, sour, sweet, alive. When I swallowed, I felt something slide down my spine, like liquid metal. My ears rang, my mouth stretched, my skin tightened, and then I blacked out. When I woke up, my tongue had changed, longer, split. I couldn't form words right. My fingers were bent, not broken, just reconfigured. My reflection didn't look like me anymore. My eyes had doubled. My smile was too wide. And when I breathed, it wasn't just air, it was something else. Something inside me, breathing with me, not a parasite, a partner, a tenant, maybe a god. Now I don't feel hunger, I feel need. I don't eat anymore, I feed, on sounds, on sleep, on memories that aren't mine, and I know he's watching. The one who gave me the tray, he's waiting, not for thanks but for release. Because this was never a meal, it was a ritual, a contract, and I said yes. Every bite was a signature, every swallow a promise. I ate what he gave me, and now I am what he made. And soon I'll be hungry too. Part 10. Returning to self. The journey was always home. I don't know when the strangers stopped being strangers. I only know they weren't new. Not really. Every one of them, the man in the hallway, the neighbor without curtains, the voice in the walls, the figure behind the break room door, they all had something in common. Something I didn't see until the very end. They never introduced themselves, they already knew me. My name was Emily, or Ava, or Matthew, or maybe none of those. Maybe I've always just been the one listening, because that's what they want. Someone who hears, someone who answers, someone who believes the door can stay shut, even while the thing behind it learns your name in reverse. I've returned to the house now. The first house. The one I left behind when I was too young to know that the rooms remembered. I drove for 2 days without stopping. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just followed the roads as they curved through forgotten towns and towards something older than memory. The house was exactly as I left it, wood rotted, windows blackened, the porch sagging like a mouth that had forgotten how to smile, but the door opened the moment I touched it, as if it had been waiting. Inside, silence. Not emptiness, expectation. The air was warm, stale, filled with the breath of something that hadn't exhaled in years. I walked through each room. They had changed, but not really. Furniture gone, wallpaper peeled, but the smell was the same. Damp and sweet, like something buried in the walls still ripening. And then I found it. The mirror. The one that had always been here, tall, framed in cracked gold, covered with a sheet. I knew not to lift it. I did it anyway. My reflection smiled first. Not me, it. My face, but not mine, the smile too wide, the eyes slightly off. It raised its hand before I did. Then it whispered, not with lips but inside my skull. You brought them back. I turned. The house had changed. The walls pulsed. The floors breathed. Shadows moved independently, cast by no source. And in each room something waited. In the kitchen, the neighbor, gnawing on a cold roast that twitched with every bite. He looked up. His jaw unhinged. He smiled. Not in greeting, but in recognition. In the hallway, the nurse, eyes stitched shut, hands wet with something that dripped backward. She whispered a name I hadn't heard since birth, my real name, the one no one ever taught me. In the basement, the counselor, or what was left of him, kneeling in front of a wall where hundreds of mouths had bloomed like fungus. All whispering, all breathing, all speaking the same phrase in unison, we remember your shape. I backed away. But there was nowhere to go. Because this house, this place, wasn't a building. It was a memory, a body, mine, or rather what remained of me after everything was taken. This wasn't a haunting, it was a harvesting. All the people I thought I saw, all the strangers I feared, they weren't strangers. They were versions, past lives, abandoned selves, emotions too dark to keep and too dangerous to kill. They had followed me not because they were outside, but because they were waiting for me to return to where I'd left them. This house, this skin, this mind. And now they welcomed me home. The last room was the attic. The doorknob was wet. Pulsing slightly, I turned it. Inside, a crib, not dusty, not abandoned, fresh, clean, waiting. And in the crib something moved. Wrapped in blankets of hair and pages torn from diaries I never wrote, I leaned closer. It opened its eyes. They were mine, exactly mine, but the mouth. The mouth was still forming, and as it opened, the breath that left it wasn't sound, it was light, blinding, warm, terrifying. It spoke one final word before the house swallowed everything. Return. They say death is a moment. I disagree. It's a hallway with many doors, and some of them lead not to endings but to mirrors, and if you stare long enough, you'll realize the person behind the glass isn't trapped. You are. And they've been waiting for you to come home. It started with a whisper, a shadow in the hallway, a neighbor who smiled too wide, a gift left on the porch that felt too personal. Over 10 haunting, interconnected chapters, the stranger next to you unraveled a tale of unseen eyes, suffocating familiarity, and the horrors that hide in the folds of ordinary life. At the surface, these were separate stories. A nurse haunted by footsteps in a break room, a woman watched through curtainless windows, a man stalked by a faceless reflection, a person fed something unknown that began to grow inside them. But when read as a whole, the series reveals its terrifying truth. The evil wasn't coming from outside. It had always been within. Each character was simply a different expression of one single identity, fragmented, scared, and lost within itself. Emily the nurse. Emily represented the first fracture, the caregiver who ignored her own terror in service of others. She worked graveyard shifts in a cold hospital and encountered something ancient, cruel, and intimate hiding in the walls of her workplace. It watched, it waited, it remembered, and as Emily began to question her surroundings, she realized that what haunted her wasn't just a stalker or ghost. It was something that had learned her rhythms, her habits, her scent. The horror was not loud. It was quiet, polite, patient. Her break room became a symbol, a false haven where the monster first sat before her, a space that felt safe until she realized it was already occupied. The break room was the mind, and someone else had taken her seat. Ava the watched. Ava brought us into suburbia, the land of false security and manicured lawns. Her neighbor, Todd, wasn't just intrusive, he was omnipresent. A watcher disguised as a helper. His gift of framed photos, notes about her outfits, and knowledge of her life created a slow, unbearable dread. But Todd was never just a man. He was the idea that someone already knows everything about you and still chooses to get closer. He was boundaryless, faceless behind the charm. And when her husband vanished, Ava realized the stranger had always wanted her alone. What made her story so tragic wasn't the loss. It was the realization that she had ignored the signs out of politeness. That fear, when dulled by routine, often turns into helplessness. Matthew the Replaced. Matthew's story was about identity loss, a man who slowly realized that something was mirroring him too closely. At first, it seemed like surveillance, then imitation, and finally replacement. The horror wasn't that someone was watching him. It was that someone was learning how to be him, watching his posture, matching his words, using his full name. Until one day the reflection started moving first. This was no ordinary stalker. This was a doppelganger from the inside, a force that waits until you're fractured enough to no longer defend your name. When Matthew's mail started arriving addressed to the other him, the breakdown was complete. He no longer knew where he ended and the stranger began. The wall that breathed. Then came the walls. A story of someone haunted since childhood by a presence that lived not in the room, but in the structure of the home. This entity whispered in unison, it echoed thoughts, it breathed through insulation, and over time it stopped copying and started controlling. The most terrifying line in the story was this: "She's not in the wall, she is the wall." Because it reminded us that some things don't haunt us, they become us. That chapter was a masterclass in suffocating horror. Not jump scares, not monsters, just the slow erosion of reality, where what separates you from it is merely a sheet of plaster and your ability to pretend it's not breathing back. The one who ate. And then we crossed the line. Into body horror, into consumption, into transformation. A protagonist receives nightly food offerings, mysterious, gray, and pulsing, which they first refuse, then crave, then require. Each bite brings warmth, each meal dissolves resistance, and eventually the person becomes something else. Not possessed, not killed, changed. This story wasn't just about being stalked or haunted, it was about complicity, about addiction, about what happens when you accept help from something you don't understand, simply because it soothes your pain. The more the character ate, the less they could be recognized, even in their own reflection. Until one day, the voice that whispered hunger came not from the walls or vents or dreams, but from their own stomach. The last chapter, returning to self, wasn't a climax. It was a closing of the loop. The story didn't end with destruction or salvation. It ended where it began, in the house. The real house. The first house. The mind. The psyche. The womb of identity. The place where all the characters had once existed together as memories, as feelings, as moments of fracture that were never healed. In that house, every room contained someone we had met, not as strangers but as aspects. The nurse, the watcher, the mirrored man, the one who fed, they were one, pieces broken and scattered, and now at last they were home. But the question the house asked was never, "Who are you?" It was, "Are you ready to return to what you left behind?" And in that final moment, that attic crib, that breathing floor, that mirror that blinked, the character saw what we all fear the most. Not that someone is waiting for us, but that it's us waiting. For our return, for our reunion, for the death of the illusion that we were ever just one person. What makes the stranger next to you so terrifying is not monsters or blood. It's recognition. Every story was about being known too well, being seen when you didn't want to be, being touched by something familiar yet fundamentally wrong. The strangers weren't devils. They were echoes. They were the pieces of ourselves we shoved into closets, the guilt, the trauma, the anger, the loneliness, the craving for control, and they came back. The nurse ignored warning signs. The neighbor let politeness override fear. The mirrored man didn't protect his identity. The hungry one gave in, and finally they all converged, not to haunt but to merge. And that's the lesson. The scariest stranger isn't someone outside your house. It's the part of you you pretend doesn't exist. The one you hide behind routines, careers, smiles, and silence. But it watches. It learns. And when life fractures you, loss, trauma, fatigue, it returns and says, "I never left." If you've made it this far, you are exactly the kind of listener this channel was made for. Someone who isn't afraid of the dark, not because it's empty, but because it's full. Full of stories that disturb. Full of truths that twist. Full of characters who are just like you, and maybe are you. If this series moved you, scared you, stayed with you long after you hit pause, please support the channel by hitting subscribe, like this video, comment below. What part of the story haunted you the most, and why? Your support is what allows these stories to continue. Every subscriber is another brick in this haunted house we're building together. And trust me, the next room will be darker than anything you've seen so far. We're not done yet. In fact, we're just getting started. Because the stranger next to you, they were always part of you. Welcome home.